I never thought I'd be one of those guys posting about how my wife, Emily, turned out to be cheating on me. We had a pretty good life, or at least that's what I thought. We'd been married for 10 years, run a family business that my grandfather started, something I was proud of, something I wanted to pass down to our kids someday. Emily was always a little difficult, but she kept the house running and the kids fed, so I never paid much attention to her mood swings or her sharp tongue. I guess I figured she was just stressed or maybe bored. We had our issues, sure, but what marriage does. Nothing prepared me for what I found out one afternoon, completely out of the blue, that would change everything. It started with small things. She was acting weird lately, coming home late, staying in the bathroom longer than usual, texting on her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd catch her looking at herself in the mirror more often, smoothing her hair, checking her makeup, like she was trying to impress somebody. She'd always been bitchy about my friends and my family, but recently she started avoiding them altogether. Then she started lying about where she was going, claiming she was at book clubs or running errands, but I'd see her phone light up late at night with texts from someone named Chris. I'd ask her about it once, and she snapped at me, calling me paranoid and accusing me of being jealous like some lunatic. The real eye-opener was the day I decided to check her phone after she left it behind in the car. I figured, what the hell, if she's hiding something, maybe I'll find it. And I did. There were texts from Chris, lots of them talking about meeting up, about quiet evenings and secrets they're keeping from me. Nothing explicit, but enough to tell me they'd been sneaking around. I felt sick reading the messages, like my stomach was tying itself into knots. How long had this been going on? Was I blind? I replayed every little thing, every time she brushed off my concerns, every time she snapped at me for asking questions. But I knew I had to see her in person. I waited till she was out, then snuck into her phone, took screenshots of the messages, and saved them. When she got home that night, I confronted her. She was bitchy right from the start, throwing her head back and giving me that "you're wrong, you're crazy" look. I laid the evidence on the table and told her I knew everything. Her eyes widened for a second, then she scoffed, rolled her eyes, and started lying like she was auditioning for some bad soap opera. She claimed Chris was just a coworker, that she was just talking and nothing's going on. She called me crazy, accused me of spying on her, and said I was just insecure and jealous. But I knew better. I saw her little smirk and her quick glances at her phone. I'd caught her in a web of lies, and I was furious. That was the moment everything changed. I'd always trusted her, or at least I thought I did. Now I was staring at the woman I loved and realizing she'd been screwing around right under my nose. The betrayal hit harder than I expected, like a kick to the gut. I felt stupid, angry, betrayed, all at once. How long had she been lying? How many nights had she spent with Chris? And what about our family, our business? I kept thinking about the legacy I'd been trying to build and how she was just throwing it all away for some guy who'd probably only been in it for sex or some kind of thrill. It was surreal. I couldn't even process the rage, sadness, and disbelief all at once. All I knew was I had to figure out what to do next, and I needed to do it fast. After that first confrontation, the whole world felt different. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every time I closed my eyes, her face would pop up, her sneering, her lies, the way she looked at me with that condescending smirk when I accused her. I kept replaying the scene in my head, trying to figure out how I'd missed the signs for so long. I used to think we had a good marriage, but now I saw it for what it was, a fragile illusion shattered by her betrayal. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got, not just at her, but at myself for not noticing sooner. Was I blind? Did I want to believe that everything was fine when it clearly was? I remembered the nights she'd come home with that irritated look, the way she'd get defensive when I asked about her whereabouts. I realized I'd been stupid to brush it off as her just being difficult. But instead, she was out there sneaking around, probably laughing at me behind my back. I knew I had to do something about it. I couldn't just sit around waiting for the next lie, the next betrayal. I started planning my next move, gathering evidence, watching her routines, trying to figure out when she'd be most vulnerable. That's when I remembered the fire. Our family business, a small manufacturing plant, had mysteriously burned down a few weeks ago. It was devastating. The insurance claim was pending, and we'd been under a lot of pressure to get everything sorted out. But I started to suspect there was more to it, something strange about how the fire started, the way the insurance investigators looked at the scene like they were searching for something. And then I saw the surveillance footage from the insurance company. It was buried in the files, but I found it by accident. The footage showed Emily, my wife, meeting with a man in a hoodie outside the plant just hours before the fire. I couldn't believe my eyes. Her face was cold, calculating. She handed something to the man and he nodded. I froze. That's when I saw the face of the man she was meeting, an arson investigator no less. Someone who was supposed to be there to assess the damage, not set it on fire. It was so obvious now, she'd been planning the whole thing. The fire wasn't just an accident. It was her way out, her way to cash in on our legacy and start a new life with this guy she'd been cheating with. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach all over again. How could she do this? How could she destroy everything we built just to run off with some stranger? It was all a lie. My entire life, my family's hard work, gone in a matter of hours because she'd conspired with this arson investigator to burn us out. I started to see everything differently, her bitchiness, her lies, her sneering at my family's traditions. It was all part of her plan to get rid of me and take what she wanted. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. The evidence was irrefutable. The fire wasn't an accident and she was involved. The question was, how deep did it go? Was she just guilty of this? Or was there more lies, more secrets? I started to think about confrontation again, about how I'd expose her in front of everyone, maybe even call the police if I had to. But I also knew I had to be smart. I couldn't just blow up my entire life without thinking about the fallout. And that's when I decided I'd gather more proof, get everything in order, and then confront her face to face. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. I'd trusted her with everything, my family, our business, my heart. And she'd been sneaking around, cheating, lying, and now she'd burned down my legacy. I felt betrayed in a way I never thought possible. It was the kind of betrayal that eats you from the inside out. But I also felt something else, determination. I wasn't going down without a fight. If she thought she could just destroy everything and walk away, she was dead wrong. I was going to make damn sure she paid for what she did, one way or another. After I had the footage and the evidence, I knew I couldn't just confront her blindly. I had to prepare, think about my next move carefully. This wasn't some petty argument. I was talking about my entire life, my family's legacy, everything I'd worked for. The fire had almost taken it all away, and now I had proof that Emily was behind it, or at least involved somehow. I decided to dig deeper into her phone, her emails, anything that could back up what I'd seen. I wasn't just going to leave it at her word or her shitty excuses anymore. I started following her routines, watching her come and go. Her phone buzzed constantly now, but I made sure I stayed hidden, kept my distance, kept my cool. Every day I was getting more furious, more determined. The thing was, Emily was still acting like everything was normal, bitchy, dismissive, rude. She threw her weight around at home, snapping at the kids, sneering at my family, making herself the victim. But behind her bitchy attitude, I sensed her nerves. She knew I was onto her, and I could tell she was trying to cover her tracks, but I wasn't letting her. One night, I decided to lay a trap. I set up my phone to record her coming in late, sneaking around like she was hiding something. Sure enough, she came home after midnight looking flustered, her hair a mess, her face flushed. She slipped into the bathroom and I heard her on the phone whispering, probably trying to cover her tracks. I kept recording, feeling my blood boil. She was so careless now, so obvious. It was almost like she wanted me to catch her. That's when I saw her pick up her phone and text someone, probably Chris again. I couldn't help but feel a mix of disgust and triumph. She thought she was so clever, so untouchable. But I was getting everything on tape and soon I'd have all I needed. The next day I finally sat her down. I told her I knew everything. I played the recordings, showed her the surveillance footage. Her face turned red, then pale, then angry. She tried to deny it, of course. She called me paranoid, accused me of invading her privacy, said I was just jealous. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I had proof of her meeting with the arson investigator, of her involvement in the fire. I told her I knew she'd been planning to burn everything down, that she'd been lying to me for years about everything. Her bitchy attitude turned into full-blown rage. She yelled, called me crazy, told me I was ruining her life, that she was just trying to save us from financial ruin. I asked her, "Save us? Are you serious? You set our family's business on fire. You lied to my face for years. Do you even realize what you've done?" Her eyes flashed with anger and she broke down for the first time, not because she was sorry, but because she knew she was caught. I saw the guilt and defiance battling in her eyes, but I was done explaining. I was done trusting her. I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible and I was furious. I didn't want her to spin some bullshit anymore. I wanted the truth out in the open. I told her she had to leave, that I wouldn't be part of her schemes anymore. She screamed at me, called me crazy and cruel, but I didn't care. I had the proof now and I was going to use it to get justice, whatever that meant. The emotional impact was overwhelming. I felt a deep, piercing loss, like I'd lost the woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved. All those years I thought we had a partnership, a family. Now I saw her as someone else entirely, selfish, manipulative, willing to burn everything down to get what she wanted. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was devastated. How could someone do this? How could she betray me, our kids, everything we built? I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, angry at her for being so cold and calculating. The betrayal cut deep, but I knew I had to keep my head. I couldn't fall apart now, not when I was so close to exposing everything. I spent the next few days gathering legal advice, talking to friends and family who could help. I knew I had to protect what was left of our business, our reputation, and most importantly, my kids. I didn't want them wrapped up in this mess, but I also couldn't just pretend it didn't happen. I had to do something, something that would make her regret what she'd done. I wasn't sure what that was yet, but I was determined. The truth was out, and now I had to figure out how to move forward, how to rebuild from the ashes. The more I thought about everything, the clearer it became how deep Emily's betrayal ran. Not just the affair, not just the fire. There was a pattern of deception stretching back years. I started digging into our financials, our bank accounts, insurance policies, anything that could shed light on her real motives. It was like peeling an onion, each layer revealing more lies, more manipulations. I discovered she'd been siphoning off money from the business account for months, funneling it into some secret account she kept hidden. She'd been planning this entire teardown for a while, I realized. The fire was just the coup de grace. That's when I reached out to an attorney specializing in insurance fraud and criminal conspiracy. I wanted to know what evidence I could gather to truly nail her. My gut told me she staged the fire deliberately, with help from her shady friend, the arson investigator she'd secretly met with. All those meetings, those late-night texts, everything pointed to her lying, scheming, and planning her escape. It made my blood boil. How could she do this to me, to our family, to our legacy? I decided to turn the tables completely. I got hold of the surveillance footage from the insurance company, plus some security camera footage from around the house that I'd secretly installed. I wanted her to realize I wasn't just blindly accusing her. I had hard proof of her scheming. One night I confronted her again, this time showing her everything I'd uncovered. She froze, her face pale, eyes darting around. She knew she was caught. I demanded she tell me the truth, why she did it, how deep the conspiracy went. Her bitchy attitude turned into outright defiance. She shouted, calling me paranoid, saying I was trying to ruin her life. But I wasn't falling for her lies anymore. I was ready to take this all the way. That night I sat her down and laid everything out, proof of her meetings with the arson investigator, the connection to the fire, her fraudulent money schemes. I told her her little lies, her fake tears, her poor me attitude wouldn't work anymore. I told her I was going to call the police, press charges if needed, and make sure she paid for what she'd done. Her face twisted into a sneer and she spat at me. "You're crazy. None of this is true. You're just trying to control me." But I knew better. I had everything on record now. Her plan to burn the business, her affair, her money manipulation, all documented, all laid bare. The emotional impact was brutal. I'd gone from feeling betrayed to feeling enraged, then to a strange sense of numbness. It's like losing someone you loved, but also knowing she was never who I thought she was. I felt disgusted, angry, and deeply hurt that she would betray me, our kids, everything we'd built. The woman I once trusted had become a stranger, someone I now saw as capable of the most destructive acts. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, trying to process how someone could be so cold and calculating. I kept thinking about my grandfather's legacy, the family business that had been a symbol of hard work and integrity, and how she had tried to destroy it all. The decision was clear. I couldn't stay with her anymore, not after all this. I told her she needed to leave, that I'd handle things from here. I didn't want her contaminating my life, my home, or my family anymore. I had to protect the kids, protect what was left of our reputation, and make sure she faced consequences. I didn't tell her all of these things right away. I wanted her to think I was in control, that I was going to do what was necessary. But inside, I was shattered. I didn't know how I'd rebuild from this, how I'd look at our life the same way again. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had turned into a liar and a criminal. That realization hit me hard, and I felt like I was standing at the edge of a very dark abyss. In the days that followed, I started planning my next steps carefully. I reached out to legal counsel, to investigators, and even to some family friends who had experience with these kinds of situations. I had to protect my kids from the fallout, explain just enough, but not too much. I knew Emily was already spinning stories, trying to make herself the victim, but I'd seen too much. My trust was gone, replaced by a burning desire for justice, and maybe some kind of revenge. I didn't know exactly what form that would take, but I knew I wouldn't let her walk away scot-free. Not after everything. Not after she'd burned down our family's legacy and lied about it all along. Now, I just had to figure out how to tell the kids, how to face the community, and how to move forward without letting her destroy me completely. I was exhausted, but I also felt strangely relieved. I had finally seen the truth, and no matter what, I was going to make sure she paid for what she'd done. The hardest part came when I had to sit my kids down. They were still young, but they noticed something was off. Emily had been distant lately, snapping at them for the smallest things, and I could see the confusion and hurt in their eyes. I didn't want to lie to them, but I also didn't want to put all the heavy details of her betrayal on their shoulders. So I told them the truth in the simplest way I could, that their mother had made some bad choices, that she was going to stay away for a while, and that we needed to focus on keeping our family strong. I told them I was going to handle everything, that I loved them more than anything, and that we'd get through it together. Watching their little faces, confused, scared, and trying to be brave, hit me like a punch. I felt an unbearable guilt that I hadn't seen what was happening sooner, that I'd trusted her so blindly. I kept telling myself I'd failed as a husband, as a father, but deep down I knew I hadn't failed. They failed themselves. She betrayed us all, and I had to clean up the mess. Still, it hurt to see the damage her lies had done to our family, to their innocence. I promised them I'd do everything I could to protect them, to keep them safe from her schemes. Once I had the kids taken care of, I turned my focus to the legal side of things. I contacted a lawyer I knew, someone reputable who specialized in criminal cases and insurance fraud. We went over every piece of evidence I had: surveillance footage, her texts, the financial records, the recordings I'd made of her late night sneaking around. The lawyer told me I had a solid case, that I could possibly press charges for arson, conspiracy, and fraud. But she warned me that it wouldn't be an easy process. Emily was clever, she knew how to manipulate people, and she had the resources to fight back. Still, I was determined to see it through. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice for everything she destroyed. Meanwhile, Emily kept trying to spin her version of events, calling herself the victim, insisting she was forced into a corner, that she only did it to protect us from losing everything. She played the victim card hard, crying and throwing tantrums whenever I wouldn't listen. I could see right through her act now, her bitchy attitude, her manipulative lies, her attempts to make me look like the bad guy. But I also felt a strange pity for her. She was so desperate to save herself. She was willing to burn everything down to do it. That realization made me angrier but also more resolved. I was done believing her bullshit. I started to distance myself emotionally from her, knowing she was dangerous. I knew I had to be careful. If she felt cornered or exposed, she might do something even more reckless. I kept the evidence close, watching her every move. I even hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her. I wanted to make sure she wouldn't disappear or try to cover her tracks further. Every day, I felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had proof, and dread because I knew things were about to get ugly. The community started to notice the tension, rumors spreading about the fire and my wife's strange behavior. I was getting calls from old friends and family, some offering support, others warning me to be careful. I knew Emily was trying to paint herself as the wronged wife, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I prepared myself for the inevitable legal battle, knowing that she would do everything in her power to turn the tables. Still, I held on to the truth, that she was an active participant in the destruction of our family legacy. The betrayal ran so deep, I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. In the meantime, I focused on rebuilding, on protecting what was left, and on making sure I didn't lose myself in all this chaos. I made a plan to start fresh, to rebuild the business if I could, and to shield my kids from the fallout. I knew Emily's lies and manipulations wouldn't end easily, but I was done being the naive fool who believed in fairy tales. Now, it was about survival, about doing what was right for my family, even if it meant going through hell first. I was tired, but I was also more determined than ever to see this through, to expose her, to hold her accountable, and to finally start healing from the wounds she'd inflicted. In the end, everything unraveled faster than I ever thought possible. The legal process was lengthy and exhausting, but it was also necessary. The evidence I'd gathered proved beyond a doubt that Emily had been involved in orchestrating the fire, colluding with the arson investigator, and diverting funds in a calculated attempt to wipe out our family's legacy. When everything finally came to court, her lies crumbled under the weight of the facts. The judge saw through her manipulations, and she was charged with arson, conspiracy, and fraud. The guilty verdict felt like a form of justice, but no conviction could undo the damage she'd done. The aftermath was brutal. Our community looked at me differently. Some sympathized, others whispered behind my back. The trust I once had in people and the system was shattered. But I had my kids, and that was what mattered most. I worked hard to rebuild the business, slowly, painfully, step by step. It was a shadow of what it once was, but I was determined to restore our family's name and legacy, even if I had to do it alone. Emily was sentenced to several years in prison. I visited her a few times, mostly to get closure, to tell her I forgave her for my own peace of mind, even if she would never truly understand the depth of her betrayal. She looked small, broken, different from the woman I'd once known. I saw the guilt in her eyes, but also a stubborn pride that refused to admit her faults. I realized then that she was never going to change, that her bitchy, manipulative ways had driven her to this point. I'd come to accept that some people are just irreparably broken, and trying to save them is a losing battle. As for me, I finally found a way to move forward. I focused on my kids, on the business, on myself. I learned a lot through this ordeal, about trust, about betrayal, about resilience. Maybe I was naive to believe in fairy tales, but I also learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to truly see what matters. I started therapy, talked to friends, and slowly built a new life that was perhaps a little more guarded, a little more cautious, but stronger. I realized I didn't need her or anyone else who didn't genuinely value me. My family was enough, and I was determined to protect what we had left. Looking back, I can say this: betrayal hurts like hell. It tears you apart, leaves you questioning everything. But it also teaches you who you really are. I found strength I didn't know I had, resilience, patience, the ability to rebuild from ashes. I don't regret what happened, not really, because it forced me to see the truth, to fight for what's right, and to understand that sometimes You have to burn everything down to build something better. So here, I am finally at peace, still cautious, still wary of surprises, but more committed to my family and my own happiness than I ever was before. Emily's gone, her lies exposed, her deceit punished. The scars remain, but they serve as a reminder that even in the darkest moments you can find a way out, a path to healing. Life's not perfect and betrayal will always leave wounds, but it's how you pick yourself up afterward that truly counts. And I've learned to do just that.